So what was the coolest part about working in Ira's lab?
The coolest part about working in Ira's lab, his interest in teaching students, like teaching in general. You know, when you're a starting student, he would always ask you to go to the board and then draw everything. And at first, you're not comfortable doing that, but as you do it more often, you get used to it, and then now you find yourself doing the same thing, asking the same thing to junior students, actually. Yeah, so, and also interaction with people in the lab. He has great collection of people.
The coolest thing about working in Ira's lab were the group of people that were there, including Ira. The colleagues were fantastic. Everyone's experiments went much better having the colleagues than they would have been if they were there individually. And it was a fantastic group of really, really high scientific intellect.
So who were some of those people?
Mike Hall, Stan Fields, Kathy Wilson, Kirk Thomas, Flora Bonuet, Susan Michaelis overlapped a little bit. So you can tell that all these people have gone on to do fantastic things. And of course, it being a group, we sort of took this as sort of an average lab and realized only later how special it actually was.
The cool thing was not anything specific. It was just the ideal, the epitome of the ideal of being in science for the whole time there. It was just collegial. That was the whole thing. You were always more than you were individually by being in the lab.
So I think the coolest thing about being in Ira's lab was the wonderful group of people that he had who were just like a constant source of fun and inspiration, and it was a wonderful environment, and I think he really facilitated that environment.
And who were they?
Well, I guess first and foremost would have to be my baymates at the time, which were Linda, who's over there, and Mary and Sean, and my sort of extended baymate Ramon through the bench. So they were really great to work with.
Beer Club. Beer Club was the coolest thing in Ira's lab. So the primary participants were Craig and Brenda. Josh Trueheart was a very big member. Warren was a member in good standing. And John and Aaron also were. Janet would wear hats. I remember Janet wearing hats. I enjoyed that part about Beer Club.
How did you become a member in good standing?
You drank, whatever, you would have, your standard beer club. You would have your emergency beer club.
Oh.
You would have your I got a good result beer club. You would have, I got a bad result beer club. I mean, pretty much any time was a good time for beer club.
The coolest thing, I think it was definitely all the people and personalities, and just having this enthusiasm going basically about when you're miles away about this tiny shmoo or budded yeast cell, which was sort of imprinted on everybody's mind.
And so who were some of those personalities?
Some of those people, well, fortunately a lot of them are here, so that helps. Well, I was Joe Ogus's Roton, so that sort of, if you know Joe Ogus, that sort of defines a lot of it.
I mean, pretty much any time was a good time for beer club.
And then I came in a year after Anita, and Sylvia was there. Sylvia Sanders, Nicole, Aaron, Janet, and then Jenny. Well, there's just so many people.
I think just being in the lab and all the different people and all the people in the lab and the people he, put in the lab and the interactions that we have and just talking science and hanging out. I think that's the coolest thing.
So who were some of those people?
Oh, like Sean, Jenny, Hayok, Sylvia, all the people. Ramon. I don't know. Now I feel bad. I'll probably leave someone out, right? Anita. And it's also nice to have the Derisi lab next door. I mean, it's just cool.
What was the coolest thing about being in Ira's lab?
The other people.
Yeah.
You just have the most amazing colleagues.
It was the collection of people he brought in, both graduate students and postdocs. And I think they fed off each other really well. And so people were very independent, and people were very excited about each other's work. And so it was a wonderful environment.
So who were those colleagues?
Well, I mean, there's just a lot of people. Joe Ogus, Hayok Park, Sylvia Sanders, Ramon Tabtiang, Craig Peterson, Tis Peter, Joe Gray, my husband, Joachim.
Yes, everyone thinks of Ira as about his wonderful scientific insight, his guitar playing, but nobody knows that he's actually a matchmaker also.
That's right.
Yeah.
I did not know that. What was the coolest thing about being in Ira's lab?
John Chance Donuts at group meeting. That and just the atmosphere. I mean, the scientific atmosphere was. I have not had anything like it since I've left his lab.
Who were some of the people you worked with?
So I shared a bed with Janet Chenevert for years, one of the funniest people on the planet. And before that, John Chant and I made each other's lives a living hell. And the other people in the lab at the time were Tis Peter, Fred Chang, Joe Ogus, Brenda Andrews, Craig Peterson, and others.
Paul Sternberg, Aaron Mitchell, Susan Michaelis, Lorraine Marsh, and then my graduate student colleagues were Fred Chang, Joe Ogus, Warren Kruger.
What was the coolest thing about working in Ira's lab?
Ira. I didn't talk to him that much, but every conversation had nuggets in it that I didn't realize at the time. But years later, every day when I had my own lab, I would think, Ira used to say da 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 da.
Who were some of the people you worked with in Ira's lab?
So when I started out, there was Sandy Johnson, Stan Fields, Mike Hall, Mike Stern, and Susan Michaelis, Aaron Mitchell, and then it kind of segued in with Kathy Wilson, and Joe Ogus, the younger generation.
What was the coolest thing about being in Ira's lab?
For me, I think it was learning yeast. I had never done anything in yeast before, and I thought it was really cool to learn all about it.
So who were you working with there?
So I came as a group of 4 postdocs, including Sandy Johnson, Mike Hall, Kurt Thomas, and myself. And then Kathy Wilson was in the lab as a grad student, and Janet Kurjan and Gene Morgolski were still there as postdocs, and Rob Jensen was another graduate student there.
The coolest thing about being in Ira's lab is as soon as you had a positive result, which might take years, but when it happened, you had his undivided attention, with a pun on undivided.
Working in Ira's lab, you had a lot of freedom to explore different projects. A lot of good support from Ira, good ideas at key moments, but not overbearing.
The coolest for me was that I was able to do anything I wanted, work on genetics, and choose any project. So for me, after having been in a department where I was restricted on what I had to choose to work, that was like heaven. So I work, proteolysis as a regulator of lambda infection. And then I chose Eustilagomaides and I was given the freedom to develop that whole project.
Well, the coolest thing was that you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. And sometimes that was a good thing, and sometimes that was a really bad thing. Because you could spend a long time doing something that never worked, or you could spend a long time doing things that worked. So that was pretty cool.
Was it good or bad for you?
I think it was great for me, personally, because now I work in filamentous fungi. Had I not gone to Ira's lab, I would never worked in fungi, and I'm having a blast. So I think it was a great place for me.
I think the coolest thing about working with Ira is the sense that any question that you could be interested in could be reduced to a simple enough experiment that you could actually successfully complete it. And that was a remarkable vision to have at that time, especially considering how pathetically few things we could actually do. The methodologies were crude, we could do almost nothing except isolating mutants, but Ira had a way of framing questions in such a way that the one thing that we could do was always the right answer for it.
And so who are the people you worked with there?
Well, I learned as much genetics from Jeff Strathern as from Ira, so I had two of the very best teachers at my disposal constantly. And then George Sprague came, and I have to say we spent the major part of most days arguing with each other about the meager amounts of data that we could actually get. So it was a lot less time at the bench and a lot more time arguing about where the arrows should go.
Before you choose a weapon, say I do now. Make sure that it's the one for you now, or else you'll wind up feeling sad and blue now. Aaron told me you better shop around. Oh yeah, you better shop around. Let me tell you,